Welcome to Real Tech for Real People, episode 153. This is Tony Pittman with the always up-to-date, always informed Steve Brady.
This is not the week for us to be able to say that, Tony. It's like, wow, you and I have apparently been sitting in some sort of anti-tech news, anti-real news bubble. It's been kind of tough this week. I was sequestered, if you will, up in at Penn State. Not a bad place to be, but doing a lot of electric co-op work. And you've been busy down there, hopefully staying cool in Dallas.
This has been one of the coolest Julys on record, believe it or not. It's actually rained most of this week. This is unheard of.
Darn global warming. Well, you know, we're talking about slow times, and that we actually haven't been slow. You asked me how I was doing earlier, and you and I seem to have had a similar week. My comment was it was busy, it was eventful, so that's always better than not having things going on. When things are slow, though, sometimes it's hard to see what's happening around you.
Believe it or not, yes.
Yeah, and there's this story. I listened to it on Radiolab a while back. I don't know if you've ever listened to Radiolab.
I have, because of you. Yeah,
WNYC, and they did one about this thing. It's a tar. I think it's tar. The world's slowest, what do they got? Tar pitch. So it's the black tar pitch that they would use to, it comes out of, I think, pine trees. And it moves very, very slowly, very slowly. 7 decades, 70 years slowly. They've been waiting to watch this drop of tar pitch drop the rest of the way. And so for 70 years they've been observing this thing, and just recently, the story's dated the 18th, just recently it finally dropped. And they caught it. See, it takes 7 to 13 years for a drop to form, but 1/10 of a second for it to fall. So it's not that they haven't had them drop. No one's ever seen it drop. No one's ever measured it. You know, they go home one day and they come back and, oh man, we missed it again.
I remember it must have been, I don't know, 30 episodes ago or something. You mentioned this, and the thing has finally dropped. Is that what's going on?
Finally dropped. So wow. That's what I chose to be our lead story for today. The tar pitch ball has dropped. Happy new 70 years, septic decade.
Wow.
Or whatever we want it to be. But we really do sound tired, though, don't we?
I tell you, that's a story. I'll tell you.
Yeah, there's just a couple odd stories that I want to throw in here because we do tech, science and tech, and that's kind of a, that was when you think about it, that's old school tech. They were looking at this thing, trying to have people in the room to see when it falls. But now they had a digital camera, and in 2000 they almost caught it in one in Australia, but the camera was offline and they missed recording it. It's one of those where you kick yourself, right?
This is almost like as accurate as like carbon dating or something. They could do like tar drip dating. That thing is.
I just want to know, do they like put feathers at the bottom of it so things can be tarred and feathered? And I guess this is room temperature. I wonder how they control the temperature, and that wasn't in the article that I saw. But the other interesting.
Speaking of old school, though, what's this next one?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember the story about 6 months ago. Jeff Bezos, the founder and CEO of Amazon.
Yeah.
He's a space fan. He's a history fan. So he sponsored an expedition. They found what they thought at the time was the Saturn V first stage rocket engine from the Apollo 11 mission. Apollo 11 launched Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins to the moon, and Neil Armstrong the first man to walk on the moon, Buzz Aldrin the second man, so they were the first pair to walk on the moon. And so they were like, we think this might be one of the 5 engines on the Saturn V first stage. And so they pulled it up, and they were going to do research, serial number tracking and that sort of stuff. Well, they've just now, and when I say just now, I don't mean like 5 minutes ago, but today the story came out. On the eve of the anniversary, July 20th, 1969 is when they launched, I believe, or landed. I can't remember which. I think launched. On the eve of the anniversary, they confirmed that, yes, this was the engine. They traced it by the serial number, and so they're able to confirm that this one particular engine came off of the Saturn V. It was one of the 5 that pushed them off the launch pad on their way to the moon.
That is, Steve, if you believe we actually did any of that.
You know, I wear a lot of tinfoil hats, but in this particular case, I believe this one.
I told you about my story. I met someone who we talked for a while, and he's dead set convinced that was all made up, and you couldn't convince him. So maybe now that we can show him the engine, we might have a chance.
Well, sure. The argument's going to be, no, we all saw something launch. Yeah, we're not denying something left Cape Canaveral. We just don't think it ever made it out of Earth's orbit,
true.
Right? You know, everything else.
That's true. That doesn't really tell you anything.
Yeah. See. Okay. Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon on July 20th. So 44 years ago tomorrow is the anniversary of Neil Armstrong's small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. And so, as I'm sure they did, they waited till this moment to announce it. They probably knew, at least the day before yesterday. So interesting stories. And when you think about it, these engines still put out more thrust than any other engines have ever been able to do. These were I believe these were the F1s, F2 engines. I can't quite remember the nomenclature for it. 1.5 each engine, F1, the F1 engine, 1.5 million pounds of thrust. And there were 5 of those, so that's 5 times 1.5, that's 7.5 million pounds of thrust lifting that 3-stage rocket with the command capsule and service module off the launch pad there. And this was engine number 5. The serial number was 2044, and that serial number puts it as the number 5 position on that out of the 5 engines. Now, here's a question for you though.
Yeah.
Does it really matter to you that was that engine, or just isn't it cool that we were able to go pull these engines out of the ocean?
I don't know. Yeah, which one's more impressive? I think it is amazing that we were able to even locate such a thing and get it out. That is no small feat, of course.
And when you think about it, every rocket we've launched out of Cape Canaveral has gone on essentially the same path. A little bit north, a little bit south, but they're all going on the same essential path, and they're all dropping their first stages into the ocean. Not the shuttles. I mean, obviously the shuttles, the only thing they would drop off were the external fuel tanks, which would burn up on reentry, and they would drop off the solid rocket boosters, and the 2 solid rocket boosters would peel off, had parachutes. They'd recover those and reuse them. But every Apollo rocket that launched dumped its first stage somewhere about that same place. And every Delta rocket that goes up does it too. So it's pretty impressive that they were able to find that one and say, we thought this was this one, and it turns out it was.
There you go.
So I have to ask, where were you on July 20th, 1969?
Not around.
Yeah, my wife was not a year old yet. I was almost 5, almost 6. I watched it at my grandparents' house in Maryland. I think he had a couple.
So you're old enough to remember watching. Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember it, and watching it at my grandparents' house. So it was quite the news. Well, the next one, so I'm talking about watching it on my grandparents' TV. I believe it was a color TV. It would have been an old tube TV, and I think it was a large TV. And I was a little kid, so of course it was a giant screen TV. I think it was 26 inches, which is an inch bigger than what they say the Google Glass projects its equivalency in your eye. But now the rumors are back. Apple is going to come out with a TV.
I still don't believe this. I guess the rumors may never stop, but I don't see them coming up with a TV. And the biggest reason is, how often do people turn over their TVs? I mean, there are other much more attractive devices, companion devices, that go with the TV that just convince me if they're going to do anything in that space, it won't be with the TV itself. I mean, what do you think about that?
You know, I predicted a couple years ago on our show that they would do it, and I'm kind of hanging my hope on one of these days. It's like anything else. If I say it long enough, 15, 20 years from now, they'll do it, and I'll go, see, I was so smart way back 20 years ago when I said they'd sell TVs. And don't forget, I've also said they're going to sell cars. So I got that one. I got that marker out there. What got me was when we learned that little pin that they had. Remember that little metal titanium pin that they had that you would push in to pop out the SIM card on the iPhones, on the iPhone 3G, and that was titanium, and you couldn't bend it or anything. It was just so strong. And they said, oh, this was really us just testing out some things. And so I was saying back then that my guess is they're going to use that for the back plane for a television set, so they can have a really large TV, but they're going to go edge to edge with the display. So you don't have any of that black trim, no metal frame around it. It's just going to be edge to edge display. Now they're not saying what it's going to be. That's still my prediction.
Well, I have a counter argument for my own argument. Because here's why I could be wrong. We've been turning over our TVs lately, I guess, because look what's been happening. Standard def, then flat screen technology, now high def, now 4K stuff. Maybe we're to the point where, the human eye can't perceive any more high resolution on these TVs. That stuff has kind of settled out. People would be fine. If we were to do an analysis out 10, 20 years, we think people generally would be fine with a TV for 10 years. Could they design something to where people would be satisfied with that screen technology for a long period of time, long enough? And if they designed it as such that there was some type of puck-like, Apple TV-like, almost module, you could upgrade, detach, recycle, put a new one in that adds much more, because they have to have a recurring revenue stream from these, or I don't think they would do it, They're not a company that makes durable goods. I mean, they want you to buy something every 1, 2, 3 years, even with these iMacs like I'm on, 4 or 5 years. I mean, they're expecting, their customers to buy these again.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think their customers are the type, because they're willing to drop $2,000 or $3,000 for a Mac Pro, and then turn right around and do it 3 years later when the next one comes out, even though the one they have works just fine. They may be willing to come out when you make a change to the TV.
Yeah, but those users don't watch TV. And I think the big reason this would be a different market. So that's why I'm skeptical about it. Could they do it? Yeah. Could they probably make something profitable? Yeah. Could they do it at the scale I think that would be attractive enough for them? I think that's the big question. But the opportunity is there. I mean, are you happy with your cable or satellite box? I'm sure the answer is no way, compared to what technology can do today. This is the one thing. It gives me the feeling like picking up my phone did in 2006, 2007. Like, come on, guys. And I've got DirecTV. I think they're, almost up-to-date stuff. It's not that old, and it's still crap, compared to what technology in that space can do. It's crap. And could Apple do something there that would have people say, almost like what they did with AT&T here in the U.S. Oh my gosh, that device is. I'm dumping my existing carrier. I'm there because I want that device. Could they do something like that? I would hope they pick DirecTV. But could they do something like that would make people drop whatever cable company they have, drop AT&T Uverse, drop Dish, and go there because of that Apple set-top experience?
It'd be interesting to see if they were to do it. Obviously, as part of the Rural Electric Cooperative movement now, board of directors for Sullivan Rural Electric Company, or cooperative, we had a lot of discussions this week at the Pennsylvania.
I blame you for making a plug there.
Rural America.
I blame you for making a plug there, but I can't buy power from them if I wanted to. I don't think.
I don't think you can. In fact, because of where you are, I'm willing to bet that you are not served by a power cooperative. Although
I am.
Texas
I am
has
actually.
some of the best. Are you served by a power cooperative?
Yeah, CoSurf. Yeah.
Really? Interesting. So they're
Yes,
part
sir.
of us. They're part of the NRECA then.
No
Uh,
way.
yeah, I'm assuming CoServe, COSCER.
COSCRV. I'm trying to find a bill or something
Interesting.
from them.
Does it say Touchstone or Touch? Uh, I'm flipping through here trying to I see CoServe Electric. Well, I'm gonna have to look this up. But one of the things that we talk at great length about is the fact that we are rural America, and there are some things rural America can't get, and we've talked about this. This is the reason we started this show. Real people don't live in that tech bubble with super high speed internet, always on. The Xbox One won't work for most of rural America because we don't have. Well, now we maybe have DSL, but we certainly didn't have high-speed internet. We certainly didn't have an always-on connection. Many people had dial-up still. CoServe, yeah, I'm on their website. I'm looking forward to learning more about CoServe.
They send me a check every year for something.
Do they really?
Yeah, it's cool. Cool.
Same folks you see in the grocery, they're your neighbors. That's interesting. Reliant and TXU, so those are your providers. I'm learning so much about the electric provisioning business. Our cooperative belongs to another cooperative. So we have 14 cooperatives here in Pennsylvania, and those 14 cooperatives belong to another cooperative called Allegheny. And Allegheny Cooperative is the generation and transmission company.
Yeah,
co-op.
I remember them.
Yeah, so we own Allegheny. We, as members of Allegheny, our co-op, as a member of Allegheny, owns a hydroelectric plant and 10% of a nuclear plant and a few other generating facilities.
Don't you guys own like a big tunnel?
The Allegheny Tunnel. What, on 76 or 70?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, where was I going with this whole rural America story? So the problem is, one of the things you don't get is cable. Even with DSL out here, I can't get cable. And so you're right. If DirecTV were to the big play and they were to say, we can deliver super high quality video anywhere in America, and we're going to pair it with. Now, what's driven this Apple story is there's a rumor, confirmed or unconfirmed, that Apple has been purchasing 55 and 65-inch Ultra HD TV panels from LG.
Could be for an iMac, but yes, could be for TV.
A 55-inch iMac. That's pretty freaking awesome. We call that a really smart TV.
Yeah.
Well, and you answered my question I had the other day. My son-in-law and I were sitting at Buffalo Wild Wings, chowing down on the wings, and I said, we were looking at old football footage from it was from the 90s.
That's old now, yeah.
Yeah, when like Tony Pittman was playing for college. And he's like, that quality on that video sucks.
Yeah.
No, it's standard. It's standard video.
That's how bad it was. Yeah, it looks bad now.
Yeah, so that's SD TV. We have HD TV. Well, now this is high definition. So we're talking back and forth. I said, so Josh, what do you think is going to be the name? If we have high def now, what's the next one? Higher def?
Ultra high def.
Ultra high def?
Mega high def.
And you mentioned it's 4K. So maybe that's where it's going to go. So it'll be interesting. I mean, if they are buying 55 and 65-inch panels, is it going to be for that red 4K?
I don't know, Steve. There's a rumor that the next iPhone may be delayed because Apple is having trouble finding larger display panels. So maybe this could be it.
Hey, let me talk on this. I'll get right back to you.
It will be very light and thin, we hope. Yes.
How many icons can you fit on that screen?
But
resize it?
I would still bet that that's for some type of huge display, maybe for the new Mac Pro, or it's for some big huge iMac. I still would bet that over a TV, because I just think Apple's play on the TV is something like a DirecTV enabled, Apple TV device, something that merges that standard content that they could get from a satellite provider with the stuff they're doing, on streaming and iTunes of the Apple TV. Man, if they made a deal in the U.S. at least, right, with the DirecTV, I think DirecTV would get a lot of users. I think the other hard thing though is, how do you do a deal or a play like this globally? If they thought doing it globally with the phone carriers was tough, this would be 10 times as tough, right? That's why it's such a difficult play for them. But the revenue opportunity, I just think, is there because it's still a bad experience. I mean, searching for content on your cable sat box, terrible. The software is so just antiquated on them, even though they're trying. They're just not the companies that know how to do that well. I think Apple has a huge play there, and so does Google. I think one of them's going to do it. One of them's going to do it.
You just made a comment that basically tipped my decision point for what I'm going to have as my pick of the week. There's a really good Samsung app I'm going to put in here. So you mentioned the rumor about iPad. Is there a rumor about the iPhones or iPad being delayed? What's the story on that?
That is the rumor that's cropped up. That is one story I did happen to see in the tech press this week. That it's been quiet. Right, here we are in July. We haven't heard or seen any leak stuff on a new iPhone. We've seen iOS 7, but nothing on the new iPhone. And people are starting to hear rumors that they're trying to do a larger one. They're trying to get access to larger displays, and they're having trouble. The only sign yet that they're even working on a new iPhone. So it is interesting, right? When you think about Apple's history, by now we would be waiting with bated breath for that, event invite to come out. There'd be all kinds of rumors. Now, here we are, July, nothing, right? So, we'll see.
Let's flip that real quick because you mentioned the announcements, and we don't have it on the show notes, but next Wednesday, the 24th, Android has an announcement. They've sent out the invitations, apparently for breakfast, and the story is Android operating system 4.3, the next iteration of Jelly Bean, is going to be released, and it's going to be... It's
breakfast, but they don't have any creme brulee version or something. What do they call it? They're still sticking with Jelly Bean?
They're still sticking with jelly. Maybe it's jelly-filled something, but
jelly
they're sticking with Jelly Bean, and it's not a big improvement over the current operating system. They're refining it, maybe a little bit faster, a little bit better battery life, but nobody's seen anything spectacular from the leaked ROMs. But on top of that, then, the latest rumor is that August 1st will be the Moto X, the next new Motorola Android phone, the first Motorola phone to come out under the new ownership of Google. And that phone, it's getting an awful lot of buzz for people not being able to talk about it. Yeah.
Wow.
Leo Laporte basically said, because I can't talk about it, I signed an NDA, all I can really say is it will completely change the way you think about phones, and if you don't have one, you're going to want one. So, and Leo's never been known to have hyperbole. But so that's going to be interesting. So there's a couple interesting things there. So there's our phone world. I way back when, I think we covered it when I got it. I got the Motorola Zoom tablets, mentioning Motorola.
Yeah.
It was the first Android tablet. I got it because I wanted to be able to tether. I wanted to have LTE when I was working on some government contracts, and that allowed me to have both a tablet and have LTE connection for my computer. Well, the battery life on that thing just finally dried out. It was going 5 hours if I barely used it.
You did upgrade it to LTE eventually.
I did upgrade to LTE so you're right. It was 3G when I got it, and they slowly rolled out LTE on it. So I made a big shift. I went to Verizon and I said, I really like the Samsung 10.1, and you have it for $5.99 on a month-to-month plan. How much is it if I want to do a 2-year contract? And they said it's $5.99, and we don't do 2-year contracts on tablets. It's $5.99.
That's actually some good news for me. I'm glad they're getting away from those. But for someone who wants one, good
Well,
deal.
and what I was looking at is I'm going, okay, so hang on. So I'm gonna stick with. I've got an AT&T phone that I can tether, and I've got the Verizon. So I like having the ability to move between service areas because sometimes one will have better service than the other.
Hmm.
Also gives me 10 gigs of data to bounce back and forth.
It's also an excuse for you to have more gadgets, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely, right on the nose. Well, so for $150 less, I could get a 16 gig 10.1 with Wi-Fi only. So my quandary was, do I go ahead and pay the $5.99, go on the month-to-month contract to keep my 5 gigs for $50 data plan, and have LTE and tether off of it, or do I get what I could either get a free JetPack or for $50 more get one with twice the battery life on these little JetPacks or MyFis.
Hmm.
I'm pulling around. I've got mine charging right now, but this is just a tiny little MyFi. It's the nice bright Verizon red lights on it and everything, and you can essentially get it for $50 after rebates and everything. And then
Yeah, that is a 2-year deal, I assume.
that is a 2-year deal. And what's nice about that is that I can have anything tethered to it, and I used it extensively. So my glass was tethered to it all week.
Hmm.
Since I got it on Tuesday, my tablet was tethered to it. My computer for a while on and off was tethered to it, and I charged it on Tuesday, and I just had to charge it again 2 hours ago. So it's got phenomenal life to it. The tablet I got, you'll never guess what app I installed to see how the battery's doing.
Oh, let me guess. Battery widget reborn.
Yeah. So let me take a look and see what it's telling me here. I unplugged it this morning at 5 o'clock, 5:30 when I woke up, and
Wow,
it now says it's empty in 2 days, 3 hours, and 46 minutes.
It's iPad-like.
Yeah. So the Samsung Note 10.1 has phenomenal battery life. It goes with the tethering for the other one, phenomenal battery life. And so that's what I was trying to figure out. Which way do I want to go? I'm not really ready to talk much about the 10.1 Note other than I got it because it has a quad core, and I got it because it has the pen, so I can actually have fine detail when I'm writing on PDFs rather than finger painting, as one gal at Best Buy referred to it. But the JetPack is really nice, and one of the things I like about it is I can name the router on it. You know when you're traveling and you see all these MyFis pop up with the weird names that they give? Well, mine doesn't have that weird name. Mine has a name following the nomenclature that I use for everything else. It's named after an airplane.
Yeah, mine has a name too. Yeah. But that is cool because you see all the generic ones,
Yeah, and you can change the passphrase just like you can on your router. You can go in. I use the same password I use on everything else, so the family knows if they see Thunderbolt 2, they know what the passphrase is, and they'll be able to get on there. I just tell them, look, it's 5 gigs. You owe me $10. So that's the decision I had. I kind of crowdsourced it. I tossed it out there, asking people what their thoughts were.
But still Android tablet again. I know you were thinking about Windows tablet at one point, if I believe.
Yeah, I again looked at the new pricing for the RT, the Microsoft Surface RT, and they're down to $399, coming down to $199. Rumor has it. But no, I'm really comfortable with the Android operating system for these mobile portable devices.
Sad for Microsoft, they're struggling. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that for them, but I think they are under some pressure. People are comfortable with iOS and Android on these devices. No one's holding out to buy Windows tablets, I don't think. So.
Yeah, I mean, I like Windows 8. I really do. And I'm using the Sony notebook with the touchscreen. Bought Matthew the same notebook, so he has
That's
the
right,
Sony.
You went to Sony. Forgot. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because Matthew was doing something the other day on his computer, and he started just whipping through the screen with his fingers, just kind of really manhandling the screen. And Jenny goes, "How often do you use it?" He goes, "All the time." So he really is engaging in that touch interface. that comes with this computer. It's an ultrabook, so it's very, very light, and so I'm happy with that. So I still view Windows as my machine. It's my box for real computing power. But for consumption, I've said all along that I thought the iPad and these tablets were consumption devices and not heavy-duty creation devices. I wish Chris was on here, but
it's changing.
Yeah, but I still see them as my consumption device.
Yeah. I think depending on what you create, knowing what you do, I'm sure, right? You need heavier duty creation. But man, they've evolved. I think for the average person, a lot of them, will continue to buy these things and use them as their computing device. We're certainly seeing that when you look at what's going on with the PC business. So times are changing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. One of the things that I have noticed on Jelly Bean on this tablet is I can actually have multiple windows open. And when I mean windows, I mean windowed. So I can have like my Google Hangout chat, text chat, sitting over here in a corner where I'm talking to my brother while I'm reading a PDF.
Samsung's done that. I remember they had over the holidays, they had a big competitive booth set up in the mall, and they would show you all that stuff, give you a T-shirt and everything for watching them do that. It was pretty cool, and Apple's not doing that yet, right? But I wasn't clear how much of that was Samsung or how much of that was, core Android. I thought it was a Samsung deal on top of Android. Do you know?
I don't know. I just assumed it was part of the Jelly Bean upgrade for the tablets because I never got Jelly Bean on the Zoom. And I still have the Zoom. I'm still going to use it. I've got these great docking connectors with speakers, so it certainly is going to be my media playing device. But that's charging all the time when it's on there. So that gets rid of the other problem I had. It's always on Wi-Fi when I'm in the house. So it'll be interesting to see if that ever gets Jelly Bean, if that's a Jelly Bean feature or a Samsung feature. One other thing that's interesting on this tablet, which you and I both enjoy on our phones, and it's going to be a foreshadowing of my pick of the week, is we have infrared. The IR blaster is on that tablet as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so there's some things we'll talk about in a bit. So our favorite friend, Bruce Schneier, what does he have to say about airport security?
It's interesting. A headline: Bruce Schneier has something good to say about something security related. Usually, he's more known for knocking down myths around security and telling us we're not secure and this is a waste. But have you ever flown maybe internationally or somewhere where you've walked up to someone and they're like, "Okay, push the button"?
No.
Have you ever had that experience? I've had that in a couple of places. Most recently, like when you fly into Mexico. You go through customs, etc. But before they let you finally out, you walk up to this little pole, and the guy says, "Just push a button," and then the light will either turn red or green. If it turns green, they're like, "Okay, go ahead." If it turns red, then all of a sudden you're laying out all your stuff, on a table, and they're looking at everything. And so they've gone to that kind of, he calls it like electronic randomizer approach as a real security deterrent, one that doesn't necessarily inconvenience everybody. It gets rid of the dangers of things like bias or profiling, and he would argue it's pretty effective. I'd love to see something like that instead of by default treating everybody the same, poorly, or by using unfair or in some cases just awkward profiling techniques to try to catch people. Use the electronic randomizer approach. I thought it was an interesting headline I read there, interesting article.
Yeah, and you hope that there really will be truly random, and nobody can sit there and watch long enough to detect a pattern, but their randomizers are really pretty good these days. Even pseudo random number generators, it takes a lot of observations to pick up on something like that. You got to feel sorry for the person who gets the body cavity search simply because it was the luck of the draw. But It does remind me of The Lottery. It was a movie that we had to watch back in the 70s in school where the town would do a lottery, and whoever drew the short straw would get stoned to death for no reason other than they drew the short straw. And it was some weird... I never understood why they had to show it to kids in middle school or junior high. Back in my day, it was junior high. Ooh, no middle school for us. And the message, I don't know what the message was, but in this case, it's pretty clear. You won't know if you're going to get picked or not. So I guess if you send 5 people through, each with a bomb.
Yeah. Well, you know,
4 go to jail,
know.
1 gets through.
You never know if you're going to get picked or not, but you know, I've been there, I think, 3 or 4 times last year. Haven't gotten the red light yet, but I've seen what happens to people who get the red light. And, you know, if someone's seeing that and they can't game this thing, they can't, you know, I got to imagine it probably does make them think twice about, you know, doing something they shouldn't do. And the vast majority of people are pushing the button and going about their business without being horribly inconvenienced. Interesting. You know, something to think. I wish we'd get more creative in this space for sure.
That would be quite interesting. Now, one of the things that enables us to do these random number generators is the power of our computers. The power
Yeah.
computers have gotten much more powerful. We've got, you know, i5s and i7s. Just the other day, I was telling somebody that my first notebook computer was a 386. I think it might have been a 286. No, it was a 386. And my dad commented that there was more computing power in that computer than not just was on the Apollo.
Oh, definitely.
System.
Yeah.
Apollo on board, they had an 8K.
Yeah.
Memory store,
Might have
solid.
more power than the entire space program for all I know.
He said it had more power. It had more processing power than all of Mission Control.
Yeah, I was guessing I was going to, but sure, yeah.
And he goes, the only real difference is you could control Mission Control, except you don't have enough input-output ports to
Yeah.
do all of it. But you know, and I mentioned on the Apollo, my dad, he designed the guidance system. I think I mentioned this. He worked on the design team, and they had 8K of memory instead of a hard drive with disks. They had a drum, and he tells the story all the time about the drum spinning around. 8K of memory. So you have an interesting question here.
Well, I only put this in here, Steve, because I need you to do the math for me. I can't figure it out. So Slashdot had a poll, and it was compared to my first computer. So they're asking you, right? Compared to your first computer, your current computer has how much more memory, you know, than your first one. So if my first one, the first one I can remember was like an Apple II that had what, 64K?
Okay.
How much more would my 8 gig computer be than that?
Well, you know, and I started looking at it, going, see, my first computer was a TI-99 4A, and I'm pretty sure that it had 16 kilobytes.
Jeez.
Because I got a big box that my wife referred to, because I had it when I was in college, this big box where you would put big cards, and you know, what you can't tell here is this is about 8 inches in length, but it was 1.5 inches in width.
Wow.
And then PC card size to about 4 inches tall. This big thing would slide into this big box that sounded like a vacuum cleaner when it was turned on, and that added 32K. You know, so wow, I have 48 kilobytes.
So 48. At least give it credit for 48.
You know, so I'm looking at this going, okay, I had 16 kilobytes, and now I'm at 12 gigabytes on my.
You're at 12. Jeez.
You know, on my desktop. My notebook is 8.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm going, I'm going to say that the difference in size is rounding error 12 gigabytes.
Yeah.
So whatever that number is, that's essentially it.
I mean, yeah, it is amazing how, and not only how that power is increased, but at the same time, you know, Moore's Law, how much smaller the devices have gotten at the same time. You know, I'm sure people designing machines back then would never have guessed that in such a short time, you know, machines would be able to do what they're doing today. I mean,
you look at the 2 little cards, you know, and again, they're about 2.5 inches long, 3 inches long, about 1 inch high, and wafer thin. 2 of those, 4 gigabytes each in my notebook computer.
Yeah.
And compare that to that card I was describing that had all those memory chips on there to give you 32 kilobytes.
Yeah.
So a
You used to take,
gigabyte,
entire rooms, warehouse-size areas to have.
so a gigabyte is a
Memory.
billion, right?
Yes.
So we go from 64,000 to 8 billion. That's significant. I mean, like I say, rounding error. The difference is 8 billion. That's a significant thing. And the other thing to think about is that the speed of this memory is increasing as well. We talk about the clock speeds on these things.
Yeah, a gigabyte is a billion bytes. Yep.
I could ask Google Glass what's 8 billion divided, or what's 8 billion divided by 60.
But I think you're right. It is like, essentially a billion times more because we.
It's just phenomenal. Just the difference in this thing. You're absolutely right, and the speed is phenomenal. And they're actually talking about your first PC, which was for many people was capped at 640 kilobytes, which was, when you think about that was 10 times the size of your Apple or your Commodore 64.
Yeah.
And if you had a VIC-20, you had 20 kilobytes. I mean, that's actually where that name came from.
The VIC-20s. I remember those PCs. I never had those, but I remember them. Yeah.
And then there was the Commodore 128, and it got its name, conveniently, because it had twice as much memory as the Commodore 64.
Creative names, yeah.
So there's how.
Hey, Apple, even creative Apple was like Apple IIe, right? Apple IIc. Very creative names back then.
An Apple II Color. And then the Color Mac, or whatever they call it.
Then they finally went to Mac, yeah.
At least we had the Peanut with the PC World, right? PC Junior.
PC Junior, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the other interesting thing here is they start off with, "This is my first computer." That's and they have a percentage of people that put that in there. And if I can, I'll drop back to rural America again. I think I've said it before here. We did a survey of our members of our electric cooperative, and 63% of our members have a computer. So that's 37% don't have a computer, never have owned a computer.
Are you serious?
As a heart attack.
Don't have a computer. Wow.
And then of that 63%, about half of them, or a third of our members, own a tablet or a smartphone. Wow. And so I go to this meeting and I set up my notebook with my tablet next to it, my cell phone, on my MyFi, and my Google Glass on, and I'm like, okay, anybody need anything? The Google Glass was the talk of the town. Everybody tried it on. Everybody thought it was interesting.
They probably think you're an alien if they, skipping right from that to no computer. What's this glass stuff? Wow.
Yeah, and I'm gonna throw a tip in here, because I was talking to this couple. Their daughters, they have 2 daughters about the same age as mine, and I was telling them about our show, Real Tech for Real People. Well, Tony and I wanted to do this show for our family CTOs, the people like you and I share all the time. We have to help our mother-in-laws with their computers. And as I'm sharing that, the wife goes, "Oh, my mom's always calling. Our computer this, our computer that."
Yeah.
And so my tip is, if you've got a family member that fits a certain demographic, and the use pattern I asked them, I said, "So how do your parents use the computer?" And they go, "Well, Dad, he's always on auction sites." And I go, "So what else?" "Well, they do email." And they do, so they're pretty much web-based. And she goes, "Well, they also do email, and they also do Facebook." I go, "So they're pretty much web-based." I go, "Do they have an email program, or do they open up the browser and they do email from there?" And they go, "Oh, they open up the browser, they log into Gmail."
Yeah.
So you can imagine what my tip for them was. I'm sure. I said, at Christmas, spend $250 and get them a Chromebook.
I knew you were going there. HP sells
Chromebooks. $500. I'm sorry?
HP sells Chromebooks.
Do you?
Oh, sure.
So and you're probably in that $250 to $300 range.
I'll check.
So if you have a family member that spends their life doing emails and web browsing, you can get them a tablet, but if they like the idea of a keyboard and a computer, that's what they're comfortable with. My tip is look to that family member and get them a Chromebook, whether it's an HP or a Samsung or a. I wouldn't say go for the Pixel. I mean, don't spend
Oh no, not that
$1,300
one. No.
on a high-end Chromebook. Leave that for the Jeff Jarvises of the world. And when I started telling them this, they go, "Wow!" I go, and I don't think you can really break it. It's not like I opened up this one program and this virus got on here and now I don't know what to do. You have Google Docs, so you can do word processing. You can do basic spreadsheeting. We manage our family budget in Google Docs on a spreadsheet. And so my tip to listeners who've made it this far is seriously consider, if you're looking to give something to help a loved one, a family CTO, and you see that they fit this pattern, seriously consider a gift of a Chromebook for them.
Yeah. Yeah, ours is around 280, $300. If that's what people do, if they're living in the web, go for it. Although I must be honest, being completely unbiased, since my parents started using the iPad, our relationship has pretty much evaporated. I mean,
it's the same sort of thing, essentially.
They used to call all the time, this, that. Since my mom mostly started using the iPad, she doesn't need me anymore. I never talk to her. So that's very interesting. But PCs, they did. I mean, let's be honest, they just have gotten so complex, right, for the average user. And I think for what people do, like you described, going to auction sites, all this stuff, they don't need them. I mean, let's be honest, they don't need them. And so other devices, whether it be Apple's iPad type approach or Google's approach, multi-front approach with things like Chromebooks, that's what you're going to see in the future, I believe.
Yeah, and when we had the conversation, you're right. An iPad would be a great choice. An Android tablet would be another choice, maybe not as good. I've heard some other people who just
depends on how much you want to talk to your parents. If you want to talk to them a little bit more, yeah, go with the Android tablet. If you just don't want to talk to them, yeah, you might go with the iPad.
Yeah. It's funny though, because my parents still can't figure out their iPad. They can't. I don't understand it. I just leave that to Chris. No, I don't do the Apple stuff anymore. Chris, you talk to me.
You got options. Yeah.
Well, because the other thing I thought was interesting is, as they talked through this, the idea that it would be a portable computer too, because the computer that mom and dad have is upstairs. Mom complains she has to go up to it, and so there'd be, and these Android tablets, they're $500, an iPad $500 or $600. So for that price, you can get 2 Chromebooks. Yeah, and they're reasonably well constructed too. But you're right. Any of these choices. So for our listeners, look and see what might work best for your scenario. Do they want to take it with them? I did ask the question. So they have internet. Do they have Wi-Fi? And the answer was yeah. They're on Wi-Fi. I go, then this is perfect for that. So I want to hear your pick at great length. So I'm just going to toss mine out there real quick as we head towards the end of the show here. You mentioned how hard it is to go through the TV guides.
Yeah.
There's this app for Samsung called WatchOn, or you can get it for any Android device. It's called Peel, P-E-E-L.
Yeah. In fact, on the HTC, they have a proprietary one that's essentially based on that. Yeah.
Yeah, which is what the WatchOn is, and it's actually quite nice. It sorts your shows, it lets you know what's on your network at this moment.
Yep.
You can program it to control your TV, so it becomes a universal remote programmed for your TV and for your box. You tap it. So I tap on CSI, and it'll say, okay, CSI is on right now, and this is the episode where, and gives you a description. And you can press Watch Now, and it'll change the channel for you and take you right to it.
Yeah.
So if you happen to have an Android device that has an IR on it, or you build your own IR, then this is a great way to have that.
I like it. And, people tend to keep track of their phones better than other things, so I find that, I lose the remote less because it's right in the phone.
Right. You're more likely to have it on your nightstand.
Exactly.
The only drawback so far, and I don't
The
know
only
if they're gonna
drawback
address
is the
this.
batteries die sooner than the remote batteries, but that's another issue.
Well, that's why it's on your nightstand, right? Because it's charging.
Gotta make
Actually, the
sure.
only drawback I've seen is that I can't tell it to do. It's harder for me to tell it to program the TV to turn itself off.
To
They haven't
program the
added that.
TV. To turn, I haven't tried that actually. Yeah. Okay.
You know that sleep feature. 30
Yeah.
minutes. I haven't found the sleep feature in these apps.
Should be easy
When
enough
they
for
get
them to
that
add
there,
something like that. Yeah.
yeah, it should be. So it's real simple, but I'm real anxious to hear about yours.
Have you heard of this thing?
No, I have not. That's why I'm real anxious to hear about yours.
So we do a lot of communication, in the workplace on Microsoft Link, which is kind of their enterprise, IM client. And one of the challenges is, if you're talking to somebody, maybe you're in a meeting room or something, and there's multiple people on the call. It was always hard, almost unusable, just have like a laptop there with PC speakers, and it was bad. So one of my colleagues said, "Hey, HP, you can get these things. Essentially, you can get them for free because they're really trying to promote this Link stuff. Try it out." And man, they come in handy. The good thing is, unlike a jam box or something like that, it has a simple USB cable, right? So you don't have to try to go through the pain of Bluetooth pairing, all that stuff. And because it's on Bluetooth, you don't need to charge it or anything like that. And the sound quality is great, nice big speaker. I mean, we were in a big meeting room with like 20 chairs today.
So that's what, about 5 inches in diameter on that speaker? 4 to 5 inches?
It is one iPhone unit.
4.3 inches.
It's about 5 inches. But it filled up the entire room. We could hear the person, they could hear us, and I think they retail for about $100. But if you're looking for that type of solution, they brand it as works with Microsoft Link, but I believe it'll work with anything your machine recognizes as a Bluetooth audio device. Don't quote me on that. I haven't tried it with other things, but you might want to research that if you're interested to make sure it's compatible. But yeah, it's a creative little problem solver, right? If you're doing group calls and you need a always powered, easy to connect device.
This is the Jabra Speak 410
yes.
OC. And I'm looking on Amazon. You put the link there, and we'll move it over to the show notes. It says it's a speakerphone for audio conferencing via VoIP and UC systems. So yeah, I think the fact that I think it's a USB connector, and it looks like it will probably work with Google Hangout.
Probably would.
Could have tried it here. I'm really interested in this one because we're doing more and more teleconferencing with the dispersed workload that we have, and even when I'm alone, it sure would be nice to not have to have one of these headsets on.
Yeah,
and be able to work that way. And I really don't care who in my house when I'm alone. I annoy with the speakerphone. So.
But yeah, I'm sure I'm going to use this thing quite a bit.
Nice. And so it says here it's a list price of $159, but as you said, at Amazon you can get it for less than $100. They have it for $93, and it's a Prime product, so you can get free shipping, free 2-day shipping.
Yep.
Wow, that's a lot of good stuff. So we start with a drip. We rocket
the long-awaited
rocket to the stars with the Saturn engine, and we end with an omnidirectional microphone enabling us to communicate with the world. So I think that has been a pretty good show for us to cover, and I'd have to say that tech
was real.